Using actually the timeline of how these events unfolded. Again, I mentioned before, this is an incredibly complicated story, so we've tried as much as possible to put it in a format that can help you to walk it through. We're actually going to start back in April 2014. That is the first date that we are going to talk about. And Rob, I wonder if you can kick us off with what happened in April of that year.
Sure. So on April 1st of 2014, Jim and Leanne Miato met with one of our elder board members to tell them that a former staff person at Willow had told Leanne that they had been involved in an inappropriate relationship with Bill. And so they brought, the elder brought that to the entire elder board. And we met on April 3rd, 2 days later, off-site and without Bill present, to hear what had been said and to discern our next steps. And one thing I want to talk about, just so you're aware of, I'm going to go through a number of days, and it's going to seem like it happened in a short period of time, which it did, but I want to explain a little bit about our elder process. The way our elders make decisions is consensually, which means we don't take an action unless everybody's in agreement with it. So we will take our time. We believe that the Holy Spirit speaks with one voice, and so we will take our time until we discern what's next. And one of the things I know that I recall us talking about that evening is that we were not going to have a rush to judgment. We were going to go where the information led us, and our prayer was always, Lord, guide us as to what the next best step is. So that evening we talked about, we heard what had been shared, and we spent about 3 hours talking, praying, discerning what the next best step was. And discerned the next best step was to try and talk to the individual who had made this claim, this allegation. We did not know her name at that point, so we asked the elder who had had the conversation with Miatos to go back to them to contact the individual to see if she would be willing to speak with the elders. On April 4th, Leanne forwarded to the member of the elder board an email from the individual saying that she did not want to meet with the elders, saying that she did not want, that Leanne did not have any evidence of what happened, and as far as she knew, it could all be a made-up lie. So we had that email, and with that email we also had the name of the individual. So we met as an elder board again on Sunday, April 6th. I remember we met before service. Again, we met off-site without Bill being part of it to discern what the next step would be. And again, we spent a period of time, and notwithstanding receiving that email, felt we needed to talk to Bill, and we still were going to try and talk to the woman. So we had 2 members of our elder board email Bill and asked to meet with him after services that morning. And they confronted Bill with this allegation in his office and spent about 20 to 25 minutes talking to him. And he vehemently and consistently denied that anything inappropriate had taken place. He acknowledged that he knew the person, that she had been a long-time friend of the family, at a point in time had worked with Willow, but nothing inappropriate had taken place, that he had always been faithful to Lynn. So they came back and met with the rest of the elders. We had stayed together as a group so we could hear the information, and again spent time discerning what the next best step would be. And we felt we still wanted to reach out to that person to see if we could talk to her to find out what she had to say. So we asked Pam to reach out to her. Like I said, we now had her name. Pam was able to contact her on the phone. Pam asked her if she would meet with us. She did not want to meet with us, but in that conversation acknowledged that she knew what the call was about and that there was no validity. That perhaps information had been shared to Leanne that Leanne misunderstood, but there was no validity to any of it. Then that evening, again on April 6th, Leanne forwarded to us an email from that individual, a long email, which Pam was going to read here in a minute, which retracted the claim that she had made to Leanne, explaining that it was a lie, that she apologized for not telling the truth to begin with, and Pam was going to read that email.
Leanne, I never thought that the conversation with you would go to this extreme. The reason I have been so resistant about all of this is because I did not tell you the whole truth. Now that you've brought it to this level, I have to confess before it goes any further, and I don't want anybody to get into trouble, but I also want you to not be fooled anymore. Some of what I told you happened, the insinuations, the flirting, but there is no truth to the other things. Bill and I have been friends, and I liked the attention I got from him and being his friend. But the day that you and I talked was after a time that I was so frustrated with Willow and Bill, especially after we dedicated our whole lives to the church and have never been given any credit whatsoever. Bill had given a message about something having to do with that, and I was so angry with Bill. Anyway, you know my frustration there already, but it just hit a chord with me. And that is why I asked you that day you came to my house about your relationship with Bill, and then started down the path of making bad things up about him, especially when you were so serious about it the next day. I wanted to get back at Willow and Bill for being such a jerk to me and our family after all the time we've been friends, and after all we gave to the church. And you made it easy, because I did not really have to say anything that day at the house, so it didn't feel like I was lying. I just nodded and cried. And you have to know my tears were real tears of so much rage and hate and anger and frustration toward him. I was angry at Willow. You know I can't even stand going to church. And I figured that with your sympathy, I could tear him and Willow down and get it out of my system. But then when you believed me, I felt bad, and I didn't know how to go back on my words without hurting you, or without you being angry with me. And then you got Jimmy involved, and I felt even worse. I was going to tell you that day when I went to the hotel, but then Jimmy was there, and I wondered what he would think of me if I told you both that I was making things up. You might have sensed my hesitation at a few points, because I sincerely wanted to tell you. But when you were both trying just to be my friend about the whole thing, I figured I would be safer not to say anything, and that I could just let the whole thing drop without you figuring out that I wasn't telling the truth. I'm so sorry, Leanne, about getting you involved, about lying to Jimmy and you. It seemed like a good idea at the time because I was not thinking straight. Now it has gotten totally out of hand. I knew you would be angry at Bill too and sympathize with me because of your own situation with Willow. And I am sorry I took advantage of that. I have been praying like crazy to know how to rectify the situation. I thought by asking you to drop it that you eventually would without me having to tell you the truth. It played out a little too well though, and now I have to tell everyone that I am basically a liar, which I guess I am. I lied to you, and I am so sorry. I lied to Jimmy, and I am so sorry. I just need to feel like I had power over Bill, and that is a way I could blame him and make myself look good in the process. I just never thought you'd do anything. I got a call from one of the elders today and told them that there was no allegation or accusation, that I had told you some things that might have been misconstrued, and that it had gotten beyond what it should have. I should have come right out and said I lied, but it was harder than I thought to say it. I am not sure if Bill has been told yet. I have not heard anything, which may be a good thing, but right now I really don't care what anybody thinks of me. I just want to stop having to lie to cover more lies. I should have never let it go this far, but I was justifying it all in my head. I love you and Jimmy and did not know how to tell you what I said was all just messed up in my own head. Please forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I hope you can at least try to understand that it was never my intention. One lie just built on another, and then I had to convince myself that it was all justified anyway. I also did not figure you would be so kind to me about it, which made it so hard to tell you. And you were so angry too, which made me feel somehow more justified. I am so sorry. Again, I hope you can forgive me.
So we received that email, and over the next several days, Pam continued to reach out to the individual to try and arrange an opportunity to meet with the elders, which she resisted. But there was an email exchange between Pam and her in which she apologized for not telling the truth from the very beginning. On Thursday, April 10th, we had a regular elder board meeting, and so Bill was present at that meeting, which provided the elders an opportunity, all the elders an opportunity to talk to him, ask him questions, hear from him. It was an extensive conversation, lots of questions which he answered forthrightly and credibly. And in addition to talking to the individual, seeing her email, interviewing Bill, other work that the elders did, we hired an IT consultant, a forensic consultant, to look at all of Bill's devices to see if we could retrieve emails. We looked at travel records, financial records. As Steve mentioned, my background is employment law and also served in HR, so I had experience with scores, either conducting or overseeing scores of workplace investigations. We had another lawyer on the elder board at the time who also had experience with workplace investigations. In addition, we hired outside counsel to guide us during this investigation as well. So we brought in another lawyer to really guide us and give us counsel to make sure we were doing the appropriate steps. And the other thing I want to emphasize is that during this investigation process, Bill was not involved at all in the investigation. His only role really was to answer our questions. As you might expect, it was the role of the elder board, and that's a role we took seriously to discern what each next step would be, and then took it. And at the end of all that work, we concluded our investigation and found no basis for the alleged misconduct.
So Rob, after you finished that investigation, it's my understanding that at some point in there that the woman who was originally part of the allegation, she reached out to Lynn as well. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yes, she did. She reached out, in addition to apologizing to Pam and apologizing to Leanne, she also reached out to Lynn and apologized for the lie.
So once you wrapped up your investigation, were there any objections to the results of where the elders had landed?
Not by anybody on the elder board. There were individuals who, Leanne and Nancy Ortberg, who were not happy with the results of the investigation. Nancy sat on the WCA board at the time. And so the WCA board was deciding whether or not to do their own investigation or to accept the investigation work, the work that was done by the elders. And so I and another member of the elder board met with the WCA board, explained our process, explained what we had done, answered all their questions. And, again, I didn't sit on the WCA board, but was informed that they decided by majority vote to accept the work of the elder board. And there were 3 members of the WCA board, Nancy Ortberg being one of them, who voted to do their own investigation. And when when the WCA board decided to accept the investigation, the results of the elder board, those 3 individuals, over some period of time, resigned from the WCA. But nobody ever resigned from our elder board.
How and when did the Ortbergs get involved?
Yeah, our understanding is that the Ortbergs got involved, that Leanne reached out to Nancy before they came to us in April.
One of the questions that has been raised about that process is that there have been questions around, did Bill continue to interact with this woman after she had retracted the allegation? Did that happen?
Yeah, I was aware, Bill informed us that she reached out to him periodically. And whenever that happened, he reported that to me as the chair of the elder board. I reported to the elders not only that she had reached out, but also the content of their conversations.
Okay,
I want to speak to that. This was a family friend of 20 years, and she had done a very foolish thing. And she had retracted. She expressed with deep anguish and a deep feeling of repentance how sorry she was for this whole thing. She did that to Lynn and to me. And at one point, I judged her humiliation and anguish to be quite serious. And I was a little concerned about her well-being. I advised her to seek counsel, find a Christian counselor that she could work this through with. And she said, I don't want anybody to know what a mistake I made. And for the next about 3 months, about 5 times, she would call me and say, would you please forgive me again? Would you please tell me that I'm not a horrible person? Would you please tell me I'm not going to hell? And all this, and I would say, you've done the right thing. You've retracted, and now move on with your life. And try to, see a Christian counselor, and she didn't want to do that. So I called Rob, and I said, whenever she calls me in the future, and I think there were only 4 more times, over about a 3 or 4 month period of time, that she called to once again express her repentance and her total sense of humiliation and the fact that she had probably blown up the relationship with Lynn and me forever, for which she was very sad. I reported each of those to Rob, and then she stopped calling, and I have not seen or been in contact with her since mid-2014.
So that takes us to the next period of time that starts in February 2015. Pam, can you describe what happened during this block of time?
Sure. It was clear to us that during this time, these two couples were not happy with the investigation that we had done internally. And we became aware that they had reached out to Dr. B during this time to seek his help in encouraging the elders to look into the matter further. Dr. B did not believe that there was cause to pursue the issue and let them know that pretty clearly. And it was then that they began reaching out to others to seek additional allegations to bring to the table.
So then that leads us to July of 2016, where there were some other concerns brought. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. In July of 2016, I received an email. I had stepped into the role of the chair of the elder board at this time. Rob had cycled off. And when I stepped into the role, I received an email from John Orberg on behalf of this group requesting a meeting with the elders. They wanted to sit down and present additional concerns that they had. So a group of elders agreed to sit down, and we spent several hours with them and listened to additional concerns that they wanted to bring to the table. Those concerns included Nancy Beach was, those in the room, it might be helpful for you to understand, were John and Nancy Orberg, Leanne and Jimmy Miato, Nancy Beach, and Betty Schmidt. Nancy Beach shared an international trip to Spain that occurred 20 years ago. She shared that there was a long dinner, and at that dinner that Bill made a comment about her arm, and there was also mention of an uncomfortable hug. Bill, did you want to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about this until August of 2016. And Nancy was like a sister to me. I met her when she was 15 in the original Sun City Youth Group and hired her in the early days of the church. I married she and her husband Warren, and we worked side by side joyfully for almost 35 years. And when I learned that my words or actions at a dinner 20 years ago in Malaga, Spain, had made her feel uncomfortable, I was shocked, because we had the kind of relationship where we talked about everything. And Nancy's a strong person, and I liked her on our executive team because she would easily controvert my ideas when she felt they had to be challenged. And I love working with strong men and women. And so when I learned that she had felt uncomfortable about a couple of those things and had carried that for 20 years, I was saddened by that. And I was confused by it as well. Because after that night, she never said anything, and we worked joyfully with great freedom for another decade. And then when she wanted to teach a little bit more here at Willow than we had opportunity for her to teach, she decided to leave so she could use her teaching gifts more elsewhere. I thought we left on good terms and never dreamed that there was something that was still of concern to her until the elders mentioned it to me in August of 2016.
The second concern, Nancy Orberg shared a story about a woman without clothes on in the water swimming next to Bill's boat. She would not share the name with us. She said she didn't want us to do anything with it. She just wanted us to be aware of that.
Yeah, so I want to explain this very carefully. You know that I love boats, and we do most of our boating over in Michigan, and it's not uncommon for us any night of the week during the summer to get 10 or 15 people on a boat and to go out and watch the sunset. And one night we did that, had a wonderful gathering, and another sort of long-term friend joined us on that with our sailing crew and their girlfriends and spouses and so. And I think it was about 10:30, we came into the slip, and as was my custom, I always asked everyone, including my family members, to leave go back because I wind down after boating on a sunset cruise. By cleaning up the boat, I go down below, I close the door, I turn worship music on insanely loud, and then I do the dishes. So I was doing that normal routine, and I heard a splash in the water alongside the boat. And we've had people in our little town of South Haven over there get inebriated and fall in the water and drown. And I was immediately concerned, and this was a problem. It was totally black, and it's in a harbor, and some boats are still coming in late at night, and I thought, this is a bad situation. So I opened the door, ran out, and I yelled to the person, "Are you all right? What's going on out here?" And when the person started swimming closer, I recognized who it was. It was a woman who had been in that gathering earlier that night on the boat, and she had come back without my knowledge, and she jumped in the water. So I said, "Get out of the water. It's not safe where you are." And she said, "I can't get out of the water because I don't have clothes on." And I was furious. It was dangerous, and it was not just dangerous for her physically, but she put me in an incredibly awkward position. And I said, "Can you make it to the back of this boat?" She said, "I can." I ran down below, I got a whole stack of towels, put them out on the swim platform. I said, "Dry off. Get your clothes and get out of here." Again, I can't tell you how upset I was about that. And she apologized profusely after that, said it was kind of a teenage dream that she wanted to try sometime. I was like, "Not anywhere around my boat." And it was very frustrating to me. It got reported a little bit more sensationally than that, but that is exactly how that happened. And I still, to this day, am confounded about that.
Yeah, and when that story had originally been shared with us, and again, as Pam mentioned, the name was not shared with us, it was explained to us in virtually the same way that Bill described it. So there was not a discrepancy in the story. Even when it was brought to us by Nancy Ortberg, she made it clear that, you know, Bill had handed towels, he had looked away, had asked the person to leave.
Leanne in the meeting shared once again her concerns about the handling of the initial allegation, which was retracted. And then, as you recall, Betty Schmidt was in the room, and she's a former longtime elder here at Willow. And she was sharing with us just her understanding of what our role was in this matter. And at one point I asked her, "You know, Betty, in your 30 years as an elder, was there ever a red flag raised to the elder board about Bill? Anything that you had to look at or consider?" And her response was, "No, not an inkling." And then she paused and she said, "Now wait, there was one time when a woman told us she kissed Bill, and I said, what was her name? She couldn't remember." She said she couldn't remember. And I said, "Well, what did Bill say when you talked to him about that?" And she said the woman was embarrassed. "We never discussed it with Bill." 2 years later, Betty brought a different version to the trib, and she identified that woman as Vonda Dyer.
Yeah, this is another tough one. We had a programming meeting in the conference area of my room in Sweden, and we were planning the next day's events and the musical selections and so. And then everyone left that meeting, and I thought of a song that I thought Vonda could kill. She's a fantastic vocalist. And so I called down to her room, and I said, "Could I talk to you about a song that I'd like you to sing tomorrow?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm just down one floor. I'm happy to come up, and you can run the idea by me." So she came in the conference area of my room. The team had just left, and then I gave her the idea about the song, and she said, "I'd love to do it. It's great." Then we talked about a couple other matters and talked about how much we love the church and spreading the vision of the church around the world. And I was extremely tired. I was jet-lagged and exhausted, and at a certain point in time, I said, "Vonda, I gotta go to bed. I'm not even making sense of myself anymore." I walked her to the exit of the conference room door, and she left. And that's all there was to that story. And when I read in the Trib her version, very hard game, because I was there, and it's not what happened. She claims that I touched her stomach. She claimed that I attempted to kiss her or something. It never happened. And it's just an awkward feeling to feel, or to hear something described that absolutely did not happen. And I think I said in the Tribune, I will, till my dying breath, I will call her version of that story a lie.
The final thing that the group requested of us was that we conduct an external investigation. They said, given these concerns, given their unhappiness with how we conducted the internal investigation, they demanded that we do an external investigation.
What was the group's list of demands for an investigation?
Sure. Once we decided to hire an external investigator, they made it clear that there were certain things that they were expecting to take place with the external investigation. These couples, which remember they were non-Willow members, wanted to approve the choice of the investigator that we used. The investigation would run the full course of Bill's life from age 18 ongoing. These couples would be able to choose the witnesses who were interviewed, and all people interviewed would have full indemnification. The investigation reports would all be public, regardless of the outcomes. These couples also insisted that there would be a public admission of anything that they, not the elders or the investigator, deemed inappropriate.
So Pam, can you tell us, why did the elders not agree to those demands?
Yes, we believed it was our biblical mandate, that the biblical mandate to seek the truth in this matter rested on the shoulders of the elders. We believe that Scripture is very clear that handling these types of concerns is a matter that is left to the duly appointed elders at the time, and that there was no biblical support for people outside of the elders, and in this case, outside of our church, to handle the responsibility.
So then what did the elders do at that point?
Yeah. So we decided that we would hire an external investigator, and we had three main criteria that we needed, that we wanted to find with this investigator. The first one is that obviously he or she would have legal expertise in this type of manner, have some experience doing these types of investigations. The second one, and it was very important, was that this investigator would have no ties whatsoever to Willow. And then the final one, we wanted this person to have an understanding of the church, to be a Christ follower, and to understand church governance. So we interviewed 3 law firms, and we selected from those 3 law firms that we interviewed, we selected attorney Jeff Fowler with the prestigious law firm in Chicago, Lehner Muchin.
Bill, I'm wondering, were there any attempts made before the lawyers got involved for you to actually kind of meet with the group?
So right after the first allegation was made and retracted, I thought that would be a good time for me to meet with the group and to say, hey, let's see if we can resolve any lingering hard feelings that there might be about the retraction of this allegation or whatever. We knew they weren't happy that it was retracted. And so I said, let's get together. I talked to Nancy Ortberg, and Nancy said, we are not going to talk now. There may come someday in the future, but we are not going to talk now. My understanding of that was that they wanted to press ahead with trying to prove that the retraction was invalid. So I tried my best, and they refused. Now, much later in the process, the 4 of them contacted me, and they said, would you meet with us now? We have a list of concerns. And I replied right away, and I said, I'm not opposed to meeting, but would you please tell me what the list of concerns is? What are we going to talk about? And what would the outcome of the meeting be like? They declined to describe the list of concerns, and they declined to inform me what the outcome, what they were hoping to achieve in that meeting. So that was confusing to me. So I emailed back and I said, well, why don't we set up a meeting where we can attempt true biblical reconciliation? I'm very interested in a meeting of true biblical reconciliation. And they said, we're not willing to talk about reconciliation. We want to talk through our list of concerns. I said, just please tell me what the concerns are and what outcome you'd like to have about this. And they declined to do that. So then I would go back and say, is this about reconciliation? Because if it is, I'm all in. And they said, we're not ready for that right now. We want to do this list of concerns. And between that volley back and forth, holiday services, international trips, and all the rest, that went on for quite an extended period of time, and we just couldn't come to an agreement on that.
So that takes us up to our next block of time that starts in September 2016. But I think this also gives us a good moment to answer a question that's coming in on emails. There's several people who are asking, why is the church just learning about this now? If there was an internal investigation, if there was an external investigation, why wasn't that shared with the whole congregation at the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Initially, when we did our internal investigation, we felt there was nothing to share. The allegation was retracted. Bill was cleared of, there was no evidence found whatsoever of any misconduct. And to share that information with the congregation when there was no accuser, no evidence of any misconduct, we felt would be dishonoring to Bill and to Bill's reputation.
You mentioned hiring attorney Jeff Fowler. Help us understand what was the scope of the investigation that he did.
Yeah, so when we hired Jeff, we asked him to do two things. The first one was to take a look at what we had done in our internal investigation and to do his own investigation into that matter. The second thing that we asked him to look into was there a pattern of behavior? Was Bill exhibiting a pattern of behavior of misconduct? This is what the Miatos and the Ortbergs brought to us. There was some sort of pattern. So the investigation was multifaceted. 29 interviews were conducted. It would be senior leaders, current and former staff members, which included both men and women who had traveled extensively with Bill. We hired the same IT forensics firm to search the server this time and did a review of phone records, church financial documents, personal financial documents, and travel records. Attorney Fowler was given full freedom to interview anyone and review any documents that would allow him to successfully carry out his investigation. Bill submitted entirely to the process, to the investigation. He was interviewed as a part of it, but had no role in influencing it or leading it in any way. And the investigation lasted 5 months.
During that investigation, did the Ortbergs or the Miatos or Nancy Beach participate in that?
No. Early on, when we hired Attorney Fowler, the first thing that he did was reach out to those individuals that were at the August 16th meeting with us and asked them to sit down for an interview so that he could gather the information that they gave to us. They refused, again, referring back to the demands of their investigation, or the demands of what they wanted for it to be a valid investigation. And because those demands weren't being met, they opted out of the investigation that Attorney Fowler did.
So at the end of that 5 months, what was the result, Pam?
Attorney Fowler concluded that there was no evidence whatsoever to support any charge of inappropriate behavior or any pattern of misconduct on Bill's part.
According to the Chicago Tribune, there were 1,150 emails exchanged between Bill and the woman who made and then retracted the initial allegation. Why were there so many?
We asked Bill that question. Because as I mentioned, the elders interviewed Bill, talked to Bill about this. And, a couple of things. He explained, right, this person was a 20-year family friend who regularly emailed both him and Lynn, communicated with them via email. There was a period of time where she was seeking employment opportunities at Willow, which did not come to fruition. It sort of comes up in her retraction. And it's also just a matter of Bill's email patterns. He uses emails like many of us would use text. And so any communication with him has a tendency to, there's just a lot of back and forth.
That's actually true. I actually had Matt Sunstead, who works oversees our IT department. I had him look into how many emails I've received from Bill in the last 3 months. Came back that there had been about 200 from him, but over 400 in an exchange. Went back and looked at a lot of those emails, and this is how they went. How you doing? Good. How are you? Good. What are you preaching on? Matthew 28. Praying. Thanks. And it's all just like 1 word, 2 word, 3 word exchanges. Most people would call this text messaging. Bill calls it email. So I think that was kind of it was helpful for me even the last 3 months to go back and really rightly, like you said. With those 1,150 emails, were you able to retrieve any of them?
We were able to retrieve a few. So Willow's email retention policy, generally for staff, is if somebody deletes an email, like we all do from our inbox, it's saved for 30 days on the server, and then it's deleted from the server. It's not retained any longer. For Bill, it's a little bit different. Due to the sensitivity, the confidential nature of emails that he receives, not just from people in our church, but from church leaders around the world, and the fact that his emails had been hacked a couple times, Willow Creek had put in a different process for him. And so that his emails, when he deletes an email within hours, gets deleted from the server. And that same process is in place for other senior leaders who have pastoral responsibilities here at Willow. So we looked at the server, the emails, there weren't emails there. We hired a forensic consultant, as I said, to look at his devices. So we took his BlackBerry, we took his laptops to see if anything was there. They were able to retrieve 4 emails between him and this person. They were innocuous. They were much like what Steve described. And then Attorney Fowler also hired a forensic consultant to look on the server to see if anything could be retrieved. So these emails, we weren't able to read them. We weren't able to retrieve them because they were not retained in the ordinary process here at Willow. It's not as if there was no evidence that anything extraordinary had been done to try and delete these emails specifically, but just as a matter of course, in the ordinary retention process, they were not retained.
One thing I'd like to add to that, this woman was intent on getting a job at Willow and would sometimes email me 6 times a day. And I would say, no, that's not going to work. No, sorry, that's not going to work. No, that. And then the next day she would say, what about this? What about this? What about this? And that was eventually growing into a crescendo of frustration on her part, which she freely admits in the retraction letter, that her frustration that I wouldn't put her on the payroll at Willow was one of the driving reasons why she really was frustrated with me. There just simply wasn't work for her in the areas where she was gifted or impassioned. But she tried hard, and I had to return a lot of emails saying, that won't work, that won't work, and that won't work.
Hey, Bill, is there a backstory? I know you mentioned that it was hacked twice. Is there a backstory on that?
Well, the only backstory is at some point in the last 10 years or so, because of my work with the WCA, I get an inordinate number of emails from people because I tell people what my email address is, pastors mainly, some business people, some government workers, and so. And for some reason, they feel free to bare their soul with me, and I rarely use the telephone. Sometimes I can go a month without using the telephone. I don't like to talk on the phone. And I don't know how to text. True, I don't. I do everything by email. And so when I got hacked a couple times, and there were extremely confidential emails, some pastors considering self-harm, some pastors with kids coming out gay, some, really difficult situations. And when I got hacked the first time, I knew that a whole lot of people's lives could be blown up if the hacker had taken those emails and put them out in public. So our IT department came up with a new, more secure way, and when I got hacked the second time, that's when I said, I either have to go off email, which leaves me with nothing because I don't text or phone, or we have to come up with that more radical way to treat my deleted emails, which is they go off sooner than the rest of the staff, except for one or two other people who kind of joined my level of confidentiality.
A couple quick questions that just came in. One, do you have multiple emails?
Just one.
And how do you see that? Just see that come up on the screen. Is it a private email?
Correct. Although it's private, but about 1,000 people have it. So many of you have it. Hundreds of you have it because you email me on a fairly regular basis. Because of my travel schedule, I really can't set up very many appointments. And almost everyone on the staff has it. And certainly the elders all have it. The WCA, many of the WCA staff, the WCA board, and then pastors all around the world, business leaders and all that. I give it out and I say, please don't abuse this because it is private. The general emails that come into me at Willow come in at, is it info?
Info at willowcreek.org.
Yeah. I don't
He doesn't even know.
I don't know what that is.
So, Pam, I'm wondering if you can address this question. So, Attorney Fowler, he concluded his investigation that there were no concerns, but we've had a number of people email in and ask, can those reports be released to the public?
Yeah, I hope you know that our hope as an elder board is to be as transparent as we can be, and that's why we're holding this meeting. When Attorney Fowler conducted his investigation, as I told you, he interviewed 29 people. And when he sat down with them, he assured them that their conversations were confidential. And so releasing those reports would break that confidentiality. So those are not available to the general public. The full elder board has read those full reports. I think it's also important for you to know that Bill, although he was briefed on the results of the investigation, he never received a full copy, has not seen a full copy, in order to protect the confidentiality of those that were interviewed.
So that takes us to the next season of time, which is May 2017 to February 2018, just recently. Pam, can you tell us what happened?
Sure. 8 months after Attorney Fowler completed his investigation, a church staff member who had been informed about the previous investigation came forward with concerns that she had about interactions with Bill. We took her concerns very seriously and sat down with her for roughly an hour to an hour and a half and just listened to her concerns. We quickly, because we felt like it was a continuation of sorts, or could have been, we quickly engaged Attorney Fowler again to take a look at these concerns and to investigate. I'd like to walk you through what her claims were, or what her allegations were. She claimed that Bill had invited her up to his hotel room for a glass of wine while they were at a leadership event. What I want to share with you is that during his investigation, Attorney Fowler obtained the email exchange between this woman and Bill. Now, I think it's really important to note here that the reason that they were able to obtain these emails was because she had saved them in her save folder. So that's what made them available to the IT forensics firm when they went to find them. I'd like to read you those because the email exchanges tell a very different story than the way that she presented it to us and to Attorney Fowler. She starts off talking about an individual that was at the leadership conference that she wanted to bring along to a meeting. Bill answers her. He is welcome to sit in on anything, but he should not pass out business cards. The woman replies, "This is not business cards, but I have a fantastic wine and unbelievably talented friends if you're interested. No pressure, you get it. Bill replied, given my state of tiredness, I would not be great company. Is tomorrow at the break a better option for a quick connect? The woman replied, sure thing, seriously feel no pressure. I know you have a lot of expectations. I'm looking forward to potentially connecting tomorrow. P.S. I have a glass ready if you change your mind. The woman then sends him a series of emails back to back. The first one, praying you can sleep. Know that's a challenge. If you can't, I still have a glass and riveting conversation to bore you to sleep. The next email, so is bedtime now or is wine time now? And then her next email, one glass of wine, question mark? Bill replies, is a phone chat close enough? Room 835.
I want to jump in at this point, if I may. I didn't understand her persistence. This was not a family friend. I was not particularly close to this person and had never had the kind of interaction that she was persistently asking me for. And it dawned on me, she might have some urgent thing going on in her life, and maybe she doesn't want to tell me via email. So I said, I'm not comfortable you coming up here, so let's handle this via hotel phone. So I said, if it's urgent, then here's the phone number of my hotel room and we can handle this quickly over the phone if it's an emergency.
The woman replied, don't want to take up your time with a call, but I'll deliver wine, no pressure. Bill responded, does a call not work on your end? The woman said, sure thing, it does anytime. Bill replied, so at 11:45 a.m. tomorrow, you will see me streak through the lobby to where the plane is waiting.
And Pam, can you clarify what the plane is waiting? What does that mean? How that interaction ended?
He was flying out the next day.
Correct. And again, she insisted she had a gift that she was going to give to me, and I said 11:30 or 11:45, I'll be rushing through the lobby because I have a plane to catch. You can talk to me or give me that gift then. This was very upsetting to me. I might want to chime in here. I believed in this woman's leadership potential. I had given her a couple of promotions, and I thought she had a great future here, and then she relocated out of state and never had a bad interaction with her whatsoever. I'm not sure I was ever alone with her a single time. If it was, it would be in my office. Usually Heather or Steve or someone would have been along there. But this was not a close relationship of any kind, so I couldn't understand her persistence in wanting to meet with me, especially after a long day of meetings. That's why I said, something's up here. Let's just talk about it over the hotel phone. And when I could tell there wasn't anything urgent, then I said, I'll be in the lobby tomorrow at 11:30 or whatever it was on the way to the airport.
I think it's important to note that we gave this string of emails that I just read to you to the Trib, and they chose not to use them in the story. Her second allegation was that she saw Bill touch another woman's leg while on a boat with a group of church leaders. 5 of the 6 individuals on that boat have refuted that claim. The last thing that she brought were several remarks that Bill had made about her attire. Bill, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I told you I had given her a couple of promotions, and the most recent one was a considerable promotion where she would be leading one of the ministries around the church here. When I was going to present her in front of this new ministry group that evening, she came dressed very unprofessionally. Very unprofessionally. And I was shocked, because the people in the room were college-educated, post-college educated, professional people mostly. And I thought, oh, she didn't get this right. So after the meeting, I said, you did well at the meeting, but remember the book that Heather had all of us read as an executive team and leadership team? It's a book called The Intangibles of Leadership. And I reminded her that there's a section in that book, fantastic leadership book, that says when you do get a new job, you have to figure out the appropriate attire that would be commensurate with the new responsibility that you're going to carry. And so I said, I don't know how to give you specific direction about fashion choices. My gosh, look at me. You know, I'm not an expert in that whatsoever. But I said, you need to talk to some other people and peg that right so that you match your attire with what is required in a professional setting. And that's the only conversation about attire that I ever had with her.
My friend here reminded me that I should probably clarify when I said earlier that 5 of the 6 individuals on the boat refuted it. The sixth individual on the boat was her, just to be clear. You to share the findings? Okay.
I'd like to say one more thing about that, because these false allegations, on the heels of all this other stuff that was coming my way, was the most frustrating of all. Because we had proof of the email chain. We had video footage that went against another claim of hers, clear video footage. The boat situation where she said that I had touched another woman's leg, my son was captaining that boat. This was out in public, on a boat not that big. And my senior staff were on that boat. They knew nothing happened. And she floated that to the press. And these are the kinds of things that my wife reads in the Chicago Tribune. And they're lies. And when the elders asked me about it, and Attorney Fowler asked me about it, they kept saying, why do you think she would make such a claim? Why did the other person make a claim? I don't know these things, friends. But to say that they don't affect me, I have spent 42 years believing in women, promoting women, empowering women, respecting women. And we're living in a day where even a single allegation can wreck your entire career. And she made 3 of them that we could prove were false. So this was almost like the capper for me. Just going, I don't know what to do with all this now.
The investigation closed, and he firmly concluded that there was no evidence to support any charges of inappropriate behavior. On the same day that this evidence was presented to the church, she resigned her position here at church. And we've had no further communication with her regarding these allegations since that day.
So that brings us then up to March of 2018. Even though the allegation that woman had brought was directly refuted through the emails, the fact that she had brought that allegation and had opened up an investigation made it a timely story that was then intriguing from a media standpoint. We began to hear rumors from some staff, some friends from around the country, that they had people calling them. They directly connected them back to the small group of former leaders. Here at Willow, they had people calling them saying, there is going to be a story in the Chicago Tribune, and it's coming out quickly about Bill and about allegations against him. We enlisted some help to look into that, to contact the Tribune. We found out that, yes, they were working on a story, that this group of people were helping them with information for this story. And we then, as a church, had to decide how we were going to engage with the Tribune. And Pam, I'm wondering if you can speak to how you and the elders met with them, with the reporters from the Tribune.
That was fun. Yeah, again, wanting to be fully transparent and wanting to sit down and talk with them and share our experience and our side of the story. We offered, I think the way they said it is, let's offer up Pam and Rob, and you could go down and be interviewed. So we did. We went down and we said we have nothing to hide. And so we sat down and had about an hour and a half conversation and answered every single question that they asked. I don't think we once said no comment, and I don't know if you want to add to that at all, but yeah.
No, I mean, you're right. We answered everything.
And then, Bill, you chose to be interviewed as well and offered to meet with reporters. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, after Pam and Rob came back from their interview, they told me that this story was far down the road, and they were very, very concerned that it was going to be unbalanced. And I used to interact with the press quite a bit, and was so thoroughly frustrated at almost every single interview that I've ever done with the media that for about the last decade I've just said, I'm out. I don't care if you want to come to the church and interview me about our wonderful care center, talk to someone else. Because when you're a visible person, as I am, it's great media coverage to be able to take a shot on television, radio, print, social media against a visible leader. And I've been shot a few too many times, so I'm basically refusing all those. This one was different because I knew the agenda behind the story. I knew that the Tribune had been working on it for months. And I knew we were brought in like 3 days away from suggested print time, which is not fair in and of itself. And when Rob and Pam got back and told me their experience, I said, I feel so strongly about asking the Tribune to give a balanced story. I will go down. I went down and sat with them for 2 hours and answered every single question and urged them to truthfully report this or that or this or that. And when the story came out, knowing the information Rob and Pam gave, knowing the information I gave for 2 hours, I was utterly disappointed in the professionalism of the Chicago Tribune. It was deeply disturbing to me. So I did my best, and these guys presented whole documents that would have presented a more valid or a more balanced article, and they simply disregarded them. And so this was a disappointing experience with the Trib.
Were there any surprises that the three of you got in your interaction with the Tribune and working on that article with them?
Yeah, there were a couple of things that, through the interview or through the story, that we had heard for the first time. So as I told you earlier, during the interview, the Tribune reporter informed me that the person Betty Schmidt referred to in the August 2016 meeting was Vonda Dyer, although her story, as it was reported, had been revised. This was the first time that we had heard the story, was when it was printed. We also heard, again for the first time, additional details to the story that Nancy Beach originally relayed to the elders in that August 2016 meeting as well.
Are the elders going to do anything with the new information based on Vonda Dyer's concerns?
Yeah, that's a great question. So contrary to what the Chicago Tribune reported, Vonda has not brought her concerns to the elder board. The elders, again, first learned of this through a Chicago Tribune article. I think what's important for you to know is that we as elders make decisions very deliberately, and as Rob said, we make it with one voice. So we will take the time to, when we meet next, we will take the time to prayerfully consider what our next step will be in this regard.
As we look at questions that are coming in here, one of the questions has been if Bill's transition date was at all affected by this investigation.
No, that as Bill reported at the Leadership Summit in 2012, his date for transition has been set for quite a long time, and that date has been set October of 2018. We've been working, if you've sat in any of the succession meetings, we've shared with you that this has been a very long 5-year process, so this had nothing to do with his transition date.
3 or 4 questions came in about Nancy Beach's story, and if any of it was correct. Were you in Spain? Did you have dinner? Did you go for a walk? Parts, a little bit, is there backstory to all of that?
There's some truth to that. I came in from Switzerland, she came in from another country. We did program planning for the Germany conference that was coming up in a couple of days. I had meetings with church leaders in Malaga while I was there. But in the evening, after I had done my work with the church leaders in Malacca, and she had been working on the program stuff, we went to a dinner about a block away from the hotel, open air place out on the plaza there. And I don't even remember what brought up the conversation about toned arms. But I jokingly said to her, well, you know, Nance, about a third of the women at Willow kid you about, they wish that they could wear the kind of clothes that you wear if they had toned arms, sort of like the Michelle Obama thing that happened during the time she was in the White House. To my knowledge, she received that just as playful banter and as a compliment, and that's all I ever meant about it. And the fact that that got sort of exaggerated and sexualized was just unbelievably sad to me, because we didn't have that kind of relationship and we didn't talk that way to each other. The scriptures tell us that once we're in Christ, we are brothers and sisters with each other. And that's how I treat women, as I would my sisters in my own nuclear family. And again, that got distorted and exaggerated and made me very sad.
Bill, your wife, Lynn's here, and I think a lot of questions have come in about this, and I can just only imagine when you read that article for the first time, and I bet just people sending you personal emails and asking, what was the motivation of the Ortbergs and the Mianos or the Dyer? How do you make sense of that when it comes to motives? And maybe there's something, because I'm sure many of us are wrestling with that same question. Help us with that.
So 1 Corinthians 4, verse 5, Apostle Paul, warns all believers not to ascribe motives to other people. He said, you can't really discern the motives of someone else's heart. Now, you can observe their behavior, and you can kind of tell what's going on by a certain set of behaviors. But Paul warns us, don't just make conjecture about someone else's motives. Now, their motives baffle me. And their behaviors seem to be destructive toward me and dishonoring toward our elders, which bothers me every bit as much. But I don't know their motivation, and I will not, guess. I want to obey the scriptures in that. I've been asked many times, and I say that's a line I'm not going to cross, to ascribe motives to them.
Is there a desire for reconciliation?
Sorry?
Is there a desire for reconciliation?
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I've reflected on quite a bit during this whole process. And as recently as yesterday, when we were in a meeting and we were praying about this whole situation, I said to the team after the prayer, if I could go back and intercept this debacle earlier on, if I would have tried harder to make the meetings that I was pushing for reconciliation, and they were asking for their list of concerns, if I had maybe played a little harder there and tried to make that happen, maybe we wouldn't be where we are here today. But we are here. And I want to get back to a place of reconciliation as soon as possible. This is not good for the kingdom of God. We all know this. And it would have been much better for this to have, no matter how long it would have taken, it would have been better for the overall kingdom of God for us to have resolved this behind closed doors. And when... And I honestly did not believe the stories that were coming, that they were going to bring this to the media. I said, no kingdom-minded person would do that. They just wouldn't. Because a watching world then sees all that. And as As upset as I was about the lack of balance in the story of the Tribune, I was heartbroken that this is now out there to the watching world. And I've spent the last 40 years of my life trying to be a kingdom builder, a kingdom uniter, and through the Global Leadership Summit, we have 100 different denominations represented. We span across chasms, and I've spent most of my life trying to be a kingdom uniter. And now we're in this situation where there's the feeling in the air of division, and it is heartbreaking to me.
Pam and Rob, I know that the elders have engaged in this process, have learned a lot through this process. Can you tell us a little bit from the elders' perspective of what your main takeaways have been over these past 4 years?
I would say the first takeaway for me is just the wisdom of the consensual decision-making process. I think when I think about conversations at different points in time, that waiting to make sure that there was unity around the next step was just beneficial. It gave us the opportunity to hear from everyone, to discern collectively, and I just am just a strong believer in that.
I think my final comments are, when this first began in April of 2014, we felt the tension that you're feeling right now. These are people that we have respected, and they're people that we love. So the tension that you feel in that, we understand. So I would ask you to join us, as Bill said, in praying for a few things. Pray for reconciliation. Pray that in a way that only God could do, He could bring good out of what has been a very complicated and messy situation.
Bill, what about for you? In the last few days, and even this past weekend, you mentioned been asking God if there's anything that you can learn. Anything you could share with us right now?
Yeah, I really regret that I, in my younger years, bantered and joked as freely as I did with men and women. In my older years, that pattern has stopped. But I think in an attempt to prove in my younger years that I was treating men and women equally, if you will, I would banter as freely with and joke with women as well as with men. And now that I've reflected on that, I'm much more careful about that now than I was in my younger years, and realize that a teacher like me is held to a stricter judgment on that, and I've had to own that. Another regret that I carry about this whole situation is that I allowed myself to be in situations where these allegations could arise. Now, I've tried very hard to live a circumspect life. When I'm on the road, I travel with teams of people. When I have a hotel room, if I'm going to have meetings, I have sleeping quarters and a conference area adjoining so that no one is ever in my sleeping quarters. Sometimes I barely let myself in there. So I am very circumspect about that stuff. My assistant knows where I am every single hour of the day, but still, some of these stories come out of situations that I allowed myself to be in, where now it's just someone else's word against mine. And I've got to remove every single last opportunity for that to ever happen in my future. And then probably one last thing, I mentioned it just a few moments ago. I wonder what would have happened if I would have tried harder to push for reconciliation earlier. Frankly, we kept feeling hurt by some of the allegations that kept coming from this group. And that does create the kind of tension that Pam was describing, and another wave of that would come our way, and we'd go, oh, now that doesn't motivate you to want to reach out and be nice. It's hurtful. And then at a certain point, lawyers got involved. And the minute lawyers get involved, then they tell you you can't have conversations. So they retained attorneys. We retained attorneys. So at a certain point, none of us could talk to each other because the attorneys were talking on our behalf. And I was reflecting on this recently. I think the New Testament's pretty clear that the business of the church should be adjudicated by the elders of a church and not outside people. And more and more these days, churches and NGOs and certain Christian ministries are utilizing lawyers to help them do what elders themselves should be doing. The interviews, the truth-seeking, the going after the truth. Sometimes it's just easier to hire a lawyer to do. Well, the problem with that is that the minute lawyers are talking to other lawyers, that can escalate, and the real feel of the personal interaction diminishes, and then the distance grows, and then suspicions grow. When I counsel people who are going through, that are heading toward divorce, I always say to them, don't lawyer up right away. Let's use Christian mediation, arbitration. Let's get a couple godly brothers and sisters in the room and see if the marriage is not going to work. Let's unwind this as amicably and economically as possible. Because the minute you lawyer up and the minute you lawyer up, then your attorneys are going to become acrimonious, and then you're going to become even more acrimonious. And this is going to, instead of it just ending sadly, it could end tragically. So I'm very concerned about the trend in Christian circles to go to the attorneys too quickly, whereas I think I'm learning as a part of this process, we ought to all redouble our efforts to stay in reconciliation rooms until God brings us reconciliation.
Well, yeah. Rob, Pam, Bill, thank you guys so much for just kind of walking us through this story. I have to tell you, after some of the stuff started coming out, I was going to the Jewel Osco, and I got stopped at multiple points in the grocery store. And as I was leaving and walking to my car, I began to think, I wonder how many of you are experiencing this, whether in your neighborhood, whether in the grocery store, whether at your job. And I just felt like there'd be a little bit of pastoral malpractice if I just didn't give you a little bit of, when someone asks me, what's a way that we can respond as a church? And the first thing I would say is when anybody asks me, man, how do you make sense of this? What's going on? First thing I do is I say, would you just join me in praying? Praying for reconciliation. I think for all of us, if we lead with prayer, it's the best posture. Number two, this is what I have to remind myself. I'm just saying it to you. Hopefully it's helpful. You don't have to feel pressure to take a side. Okay? I pray. I don't feel the pressure to have to take a side. Number three, and this is kind of based on this weekend. Before Bob Goff left, I was walking with him out, and he just stopped me and grabbed me by the shoulders, and he says, I got a gift for you. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, take this. And he handed me the compass. And he goes, your job is to point everyone where true north is. And that stuck with me. It's been in my pocket. I've been holding on to it. Because I'm reminded, in these moments, whether at the Jewel Osco, whether at a restaurant, whether I'm getting stopped in my neighborhood, my job is to pray, not to take sides, and do whatever I can to point people to where true north is. Church, if we do that, we have a chance in the midst where there's a lot of people watching us to shine. Because we can shine and point people to Christ. Amen? Amen. Let me do this. I just want to close our night in prayer. And I ask that we would just take a moment and just pray. And then go from there. God, we thank you for what you have done in this church. We thank you for Bill, for Lynn, for Todd, for Shauna. We thank you for our elders. God, we just pray that you just continue to protect this church. There's so much good that you've done. There's so much good that you want to do. And God, we also pray as you tell us to do that in the scriptures. We want to pray for reconciliation. We want to pray for the Ortbergs and the Miatos, the Dyers, anyone where there's just distance. We don't want that. We want to be one. We want unity, so help us, God. And God, I pray that every person in this room would know where true north is. I pray in every conversation they'd have a posture, a tone that just points people to the goodness of your Son. God, as we enter into this Holy Week, to begin to take steps towards Good Friday and towards Easter, God, fix our hearts, fix our minds on what you've done for us. And may we receive that grace, that peace, that joy afresh this week. This church is your church. We love you. I pray that you would just move in mighty and powerful ways this week. We'll give you all the glory, and all God's people said. Amen. Amen. Hey, thank you so much, everyone, for joining.